Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here once again. Today we're going to talk about what to expect on your first year of studying abroad. Personally, I have studied abroad in 3 different places, but if I have to choose the most extensive ones, they have been China, in Shanghai, that I studied for a year, and then in the Netherlands as well for a year for my master's degree. So today I'm going to tell you all of my experience for you to know what to expect in that one first year of studying abroad. One of the most important things to remember when you go and study abroad is that there's going to be many people there with the same character as you who decided to step out of their comfort zone. This will put you also in a scenario where there's going to be so many people smarter than you. For example, I remember when I went to China, I had studied a little bit of Chinese back in my hometown. And I was ready. I said, okay, I can defend myself a little bit. But then when reality came and I was there in the intake to evaluate my language level, literally I could not remember how to say the seasons in Chinese. I remember the professor asked me, how do you say spring? And I could not remember at all. I think if I recall well now, the way of saying it is 春天. Anyhow, I did not remember at that moment, and that was good enough reason for the professor to say this woman belongs in level 1 of 12. Which was very shocking, and not only that, I then found out that my roommate had studied Chinese for years before, and she was 3 years younger than me, and she was put in level 10 of 12. In a year, we were meant to grow 4 levels. So at the end, they had to make up like specific programs for her and the people in her group because there were no more levels in Fudan University for language training. So keep in mind that there's going to be so many more other people that are way more advanced in certain areas than you are, and there's nothing wrong with that. In any case, it's an opportunity. I remember when I had to do my homework and I was getting stuck in my Chinese, my roommate was always there to help me out, and surrounding with people that are better than you in their own arenas is such an opportunity for growth as well. Another thing to contemplate in your first year abroad is the fear that some situations might bring to you since they are unknown. For example, I remember very well when I was going to China when I landed in Shanghai in Pudong Airport. I was finding a taxi to make my way to the dormitories of Fudan University. I was looking for the taxi spot. Eventually I found it. The driver was a woman. She could not speak English at all, so that was already a challenge. And then I was able to tell her, 你好, 我去复旦大学. Like, hi, I am going to Fudan University. She was like, how? Okay. Next thing I knew is that she grabbed my suitcase, put it on the trunk. I was already in the car, and I drove with her for 50 minutes. 50 minutes that I was just realizing along the way, nobody knows that I'm exactly in this taxi right now. I'm on my way to my dream, to my university. I had won this scholarship to go and study to Fudan. I was on my way just trusting that I was on the right track. And this, of course, could, in any circumstance, cause fear to many. And so it did to me. At some point I was like, well, I'm quite vulnerable at this point. But it's just part of it. You have to face your fears and go ahead with your next steps and your dreams, and especially in this case, to your next educational development. A similar story about facing fears, but here in the Netherlands, happened when I just arrived, and I remember that we had to meet with some friends from my master's batch to go have lunch or dinner, and I figured that I was going to make it by bike because I had just bought my bike and I wanted to get into it. It was so scary. The city center streets of Maastricht are curvy. I didn't know the place. I was not ever used to cycling in the streets like a means of transport. And I remember that when I reached in front of the door of the restaurant, besides being absolutely sweaty and with a heartbeat, I was like, wow, I made it. And I parked my bike, I locked it somewhere close by, made it to my dinner, and it made me so proud. Really, sometimes also you have to know that facing these fears is going to give you a lot of sense of fulfillment, and this is wonderful as well. One third thing to keep in mind is the cultural shock. And I think I talked about this on my last video last week about how to make friends when going abroad, but I want to touch base again in the importance of contemplating the cultural shock, because people will always behave differently than what they do back home, no matter where you come from. So, for example, I can talk when I reached the Netherlands. I have three stories. One, when I got on the train from Schiphol Airport all the way to Maastricht, I coincidentally got on the silent cabin, and I was talking and giggling and, meeting people. At some point, someone went like, shh. And I was like, oh my God, like, why? And then someone pointed out that I was in the silent cabin. Never had I been in such a scenario where I'm in a public transportation where there's a place to be quiet. So this was one. Then upon arrival, I saw that people were moving by bike despite that it was drizzling a bit and it was quite cold and the sky was completely gray, like it was about to pour even harder. And you would see that the Dutch do not stop regardless what the weather is. If it's cold, if it's rainy, if it's windy, or if it's all of the above, they commute by bike. And if you ask them, they will tell you, of course, there's a saying, we are not made of sugar. We are not going to melt away if we are put under the rain. And they stick to that. And the Dutch really use their bikes as a means of transportation no matter what. And the last thing that I have to mention, at least for now, about cultural shock in the Netherlands is that the Dutch are extremely straightforward. If you ask a Dutch person what they think, or even if you don't ask them, most likely they will tell you really what they think or what they want. No filters. Coming from my background where I'm a Latina and the people back home, we tend to be agreeable, it's a shock in the beginning. But then you start to embrace it. Then you start to ask yourself, true, why do I take so long to say what I really want or say what I really think? So just to keep in mind, guys, one third thing to contemplate in your first year when going abroad is that there will be a cultural shock. The fourth point that I have to mention is more than something to contemplate. I think it's an advice to give of something to do, especially in your first year, and especially if your first year is the only year you're going to be abroad, like I have done, for example, and that is to keep your balance. I know that when you go abroad to study, there is a huge sense of responsibility about your studies, that degree, the scholarship maybe you got granted, the fact that you maybe got into a specific school that was very difficult to get into, etc., etc. Super valid. I just want to encourage you all to make sure that as much as you do all of the efforts to bring yourself closer towards the degree you're going to achieve, because you will, make sure you also do all of the efforts to collect all of those moments that will enhance your life experience, because at the end of the day, that degree will be a paper that might show your grades, might show, or maybe not, maybe your name and the name of the degree you achieved, but you will be the one to be able to tell your stories, and you will be the one who will want to go out there and say, yes, when I was in this place, I met that person who then brought me to this place. Those stories are also so valuable, just as much or even more than the degree. So just make sure, once again, fourth point, my advice is to do your best to keep your balance. Next comes another advice. Just as I said that you should do your best efforts to keep your balance, I also want to encourage you to not let the FOMO, the fear of missing out, creep on you. If you go abroad for a specific time, I really advise that you make peace with knowing that you will not have time to do it all, and that is okay. The thing is, you should prioritize what is most important for you, and also understand that even if you don't go and do everything, what really matters is that every time you get into an activity, that you meet a specific person, that you're putting all of your efforts in study, you are really the most present to them. If you are worried or concerned or thinking all the time about how much you have not done instead of how much you have actually already done and experienced and got involved in, you will have a way more enjoyable experience. It's okay. I was, for example, in China for a year. I went in a year to like around 10 cities. There's so much more China to see than that. And it's okay. I was not gonna make 1 year of Chinese and also a year of seeing everywhere in China. So just keep that in mind. When you go abroad, make the best out of the day, put your phones down, stay present, and don't let the fear of missing out creep on you. My point number 6 for this video today is to make sure that you take care of your budget and, if possible, find a side job. This is very related to my former point in which I said that it's really advisable that you make peace with the fact that you will not have the time to do it all. Firstly, because you have a number one resource called time. Maybe you are abroad only for a year or for 6 months and there is specific amount of time for all of the things that you want and have to do. The next thing that could limit you to go and do all of what you want to do is precisely the budget. I really want to advise that if you're in a place where things seem cheaper than back home, for example, in my case in China, that I was really sometimes carried away buying things on Taobao because it was so fast, just like on a touch and so cheap. It's good to take care to not have too many of those moments in which you get carried away with relatively cheap expenses. Same goes also when you are in a country where things are more expensive than back home, but in that case I advise that you make sure that you don't dread every time you go and buy something thinking, oh, back home the shampoo bottles would be so much cheaper. Like, there's things that you will have to buy, there's things that you will need, they will have their price, and you have to really do an effort to not let this take away any energy from you. And after all of this, if possible, if the country of destination allows it, and if you have the time, I really advise that you look for a part-time job. There are many, many opportunities out there in countries that allow you, and you can get very creative. From walking a dog, working in a cafe, maybe teaching something part-time. I've had friends who have done all of these 3 that I just mentioned, and it's a way to always have some pocket money to make sure that you always have that little extra to go and do something else that you really like or that you really need. Last but not least is point number 7, and that is to contemplate the possibilities of staying longer. Towards the end of your study program, chances are that you want to stay to study for another term or maybe to find a full-time job. My best advice is that you research for these opportunities even before application so that you know what to expect. For example, when I was in China, I remember we were given a specific date in which you could submit a specific set of requirements for you to apply for a scholarship extension. This is an example for when you are studying. But also, for example, here in the Netherlands, I remember that I was told that upon graduation, I was going to be able to get something that they call the orientation year permit, which is a permit with which you can stay and work part-time and even full-time. So you can aspire to use this tool to then find a full-time job as well. So it's important, guys, that you make sure that you check for all of the possibilities of your study program and even after, so that you come prepared with the requirements in case you're interested. And that's it for today, guys. 7 points to keep in mind for your first year of studying abroad. Thank you once again for being here, for watching. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions you would like to ask me, please leave them in the comments below. I will be very happy to read them. Please don't forget to subscribe. With your subscription, I keep myself motivated to keep creating this kind of content. And that being said, I wish you a successful and extraordinary first year of studying abroad. See you next time.